The rain pounded against the windshield as I sat in our driveway, the engine idling. My hands clutched the steering wheel, though I had nowhere to go. I just needed a moment before facing Dan, before pretending everything was normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. I reached over to grab my purse from the passenger seat when my fingers brushed against something that had fallen between the console and the seat. Fishing it out, I found a folded piece of construction paper, bright blue and slightly crumpled. Not mine. Unfolding it revealed a child's drawing, stick figures, a tall one and a small one, holding hands under a crayon sun. Hearts dotted the sky. Across the top, in wobbly letters, "I love you, Daddy." My stomach dropped. We didn't have children. The garage door opened suddenly, making me jump. Dan appeared in the doorway, gesturing for me to pull in. I tucked the drawing into my jacket pocket and forced a smile, pulling the car inside. "You're home early," he said, coming around to my door as I stepped out. Meeting finished sooner than expected. I barely recognized my own voice, distant, hollow. Dan leaned in to kiss me, but I turned, pretending to reach for something in the car. When I straightened, the drawing was in my hand. "What's this?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Dan's eyes fell on the blue paper. The color drained from his face. In that moment, I knew. "Avery, His voice cracked. 16 years of marriage, and I'd never seen him look like this, like a man watching his world collapse. 3 months earlier, I'd first noticed the changes in Dan. Small things initially, coming home later from work, taking calls in the other room, being oddly protective of his phone. Classic signs, I suppose, but I'd trusted him completely. We'd weathered career changes, a miscarriage 7 years ago, and my mother's death. We'd survived. We were solid, or so I thought. "It's the Westlake project," he'd explained when I mentioned his late nights. Final push before the grand opening. Dan was an architect, had been for the 20 years I'd known him. We'd met in college. He was in his final year of architectural studies. I was pursuing art history. We connected at a gallery opening, both of us staring at the same obscure installation, both of us hating it. We'd laughed about it over coffee afterward, and that was it. I was his. How was work today? I asked him over dinner that night after finding the drawing, watching him carefully, searching for tells. "Fine, busy." He pushed food around his plate. The contractors messed up some measurements at the Westlake site. Again, a perfectly normal answer, delivered with the right amount of frustration. I nodded, took a sip of wine. "I ran into Meredith today." A lie. "She mentioned seeing you downtown on Tuesday. Said you were having lunch with someone." A pause, so brief most would miss it. Must have been mistaken. "I was in meetings all day Tuesday." Another lie to add to the growing pile between us. That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. Even in sleep, he seemed troubled, restless, murmuring words I couldn't understand. I stared at the ceiling, the drawing burning a hole in my nightstand drawer. In the morning, I waited until Dan left for work before starting my investigation. I felt sick doing it, like I was betraying something fundamental between us. But he had betrayed me first, hadn't he? His laptop password had been the same for years, our anniversary. Inside, his browser history was scrubbed clean. Email showed nothing unusual. I checked bank statements next, scanning for unexplained withdrawals or strange charges. There, a series of cash withdrawals, $300 each, twice a month for the past year. Not huge amounts, but consistent. And a charge at a place called Little Dreamers Art Studio 2 weeks ago. I Googled it. A children's art center across town, a child. Dan had a child. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself. Who was the mother? How old was the child? How long had he known? Questions hammered at me, each more painful than the last. I called in sick to the museum where I worked as a curator, then drove to the art studio. It was housed in a converted Victorian home, bright colors and children's artwork displayed in the windows. I sat in my car across the street, watching parents drop off young children for what appeared to be a summer program. What was I doing? What did I expect to find? My phone buzzed with a text from Dan. Everything okay? Denise said you called in sick, Denise, my coworker. Of course he'd check. Just a migraine. Taking meds and resting. Need anything? I can come home early. The concern in his text made me want to scream. I'm fine. Don't worry. I pulled away from the art studio no wiser than when I'd arrived. On impulse, I drove to Dan's office building. His receptionist, Vivian, brightened when she saw me. Avery! What a nice surprise. Is he in? I asked, forcing a smile. He's actually at the Westlake site today. Want me to call him? No. I was just in the area and thought I'd surprise him with lunch. I'll catch him another time. Vivian's expression shifted slightly. Oh, you might try the cafe down the street from Westlake. He usually grabs lunch there when he's at the site. I thanked her and left, but something in her tone nagged at me. Did she know? Was I the only one in the dark? The Westlake development was a luxury apartment complex Dan had been working on for nearly 2 years. When I arrived, I spotted his car in the parking lot. At least that part wasn't a lie. I didn't go in. Instead, I found the cafe Vivian had mentioned, a small bistro with outdoor seating. I ordered coffee and waited, feeling increasingly ridiculous. This wasn't me. I didn't spy on my husband, but then I saw him, emerging from around the corner, not from the direction of the construction site. Dan checked his watch, then entered the cafe. I shrank back, grateful for my sunglasses and hat. He ordered at the counter, then took a seat by the window. Waiting for someone. 5 minutes later, a woman approached his table. Tall, elegant, with dark hair pulled back. She couldn't have been more than 30, at least 15 years younger than Dan. My age when we'd met. They didn't kiss or touch, but there was an intimacy to their body language that made my chest ache. They talked intensely, her expression serious. At one point, she wiped her eyes. No child accompanied them. But then it was a weekday. School or daycare, probably. I waited until they finished lunch and parted ways. Again, no physical contact, just a lingering look, before following her. She walked 3 blocks to a small law office and disappeared inside. A lawyer? Was Dan planning to leave me? Was that why he needed legal counsel? Back home, I searched for the woman online. It took some digging, but I found her. Natalie Vega, family law attorney. Her website showed a professional headshot matching the woman I'd seen. Her specialties included custody agreements, child support, and adoption. My hands trembled as I closed the laptop. That night, Dan came home with takeout and a bouquet of tulips, my favorite. For your migraine, he said, kissing my forehead. Thought you shouldn't have to cook. The flowers trembled in my hands. Thank you. That's really thoughtful. We ate in near silence, the TV providing background noise neither of us was listening to. Dan, I finally said, setting down my fork. Are you happy with us? He looked startled. Of course. Why would you ask that? You've been distant lately. I just wondered if something was wrong. He reached across the table for my hand. His felt cold. Work has been stressful, but I'm happy. We're good, Av. Promise. Another lie, delivered while looking straight into my eyes. I nodded and squeezed his hand, then excused myself to the bathroom where I quietly vomited up our dinner. A week passed. I became someone I didn't recognize, checking Dan's phone while he showered, noting his mileage when he left and returned, searching his pockets while he slept. Nothing. No more drawings, no revealing text messages, just the gnawing certainty that my husband was living a double life. On Friday, Dan announced he had to work late. Again. The Westlake opening is next week, he explained, not quite meeting my eyes. Last-minute details. I could bring you dinner, I offered, watching his reaction carefully. No need. We're ordering in. He kissed me goodbye, lingering a moment longer than usual. Don't wait up. As soon as his car disappeared, I grabbed my keys. I'd followed him once. I could do it again. But as I reached the door, my phone rang. Vivian, Dan's receptionist. Avery? I hope I'm not overstepping, but I need to talk to you. About Dan, My heart hammered. What about him? Not over the phone. Can we meet? 20 minutes later, I sat across from Vivian at a quiet bar several miles from both our homes and Dan's office. She'd aged gracefully, her silver-streaked hair framing a face lined with what I'd always thought was wisdom. Now I wondered if it was the strain of keeping secrets. I've worked for Dan for 12 years, she began, nursing a gin and tonic. I care about him. And about you. Just tell me, I said, my voice barely audible. Is he having an affair? Vivian looked surprised. An affair? No, at least. Not in the way you mean. Relief and confusion battled within me. Then what? Because something's going on. I found a child's drawing in his car. I love you, Daddy. She closed her eyes briefly. Ah, Sophie's drawing. Sophie? The name hung between us. Who is Sophie? Dan's daughter. She's 8. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table. That's impossible. We've been married 16 years. Sophie isn't... She's not from an affair, Avery. She's from before. Before you? I stared at her, uncomprehending. Dan was 19 when Eliza got pregnant. They were both freshmen in college. He didn't know. Eliza never told him. She dropped out, moved back home to Seattle. Had the baby. Raised her alone. How do you know this? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Eliza contacted the firm about a year ago. She was sick, cancer, and looking for Sophie's father. All she had was Dan's name and that he'd become an architect. It wasn't hard to find him, a year. He'd known for a year. Eliza died 3 months ago, Vivian continued softly. Dan's been working with Natalie, she's a family law attorney, on getting custody of Sophie. She's been in foster care since Eliza passed. The process is complicated, Natalie. The woman from the cafe? Why wouldn't he tell me? I whispered, though I already knew the answer. The miscarriage. The years of failed attempts afterward. The final devastating news that I couldn't have children. Dan had held me through nights of sobbing, had assured me we were enough, just the two of us. And all this time, he was afraid, Vivian said simply. Afraid of hurting you. Afraid you'd think he'd been lying all these years. Afraid of how you'd react to Sophie, so he just... What? Planned to bring home a child one day? Surprise, Avery. Here's my secret daughter. Vivian winced. He's been trying to find the right time. The right way. Sophie's had a traumatic year, losing her mother, being placed with strangers. Dan's been visiting her, getting to know her. The drawing? They did an art therapy session together last week. I remembered the charge from Little Dreamer's art studio. Art therapy for a grieving child who had lost her mother and was meeting her father for the first time. Where is he now? I asked, my voice steadier. Tonight. Is he with her? Vivian nodded. They have supervised visits twice a week. Tonight and Sundays. All those late nights and weekend emergencies suddenly made sense. I need to go, I said, standing so abruptly I knocked my untouched wine over. Red liquid spread across the table like blood. Avery, wait. But I was already moving, pushing through the crowded bar toward the exit, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Dan had a daughter, a living, breathing piece of himself in the world. Everything I couldn't give him, and he'd hidden her from me. I waited in the dark living room, the only light coming from a small lamp in the corner. Outside, rain had begun again, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. At 10:37 p.m., I heard Dan's key in the lock. He entered quietly, probably assuming I was asleep. When he saw me sitting there, he froze. Avery, you're up late. I studied him. This man I'd shared my life with for 16 years. His face was drawn with fatigue, but there was something else there, too. A lightness I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. How was work? I asked, my voice neutral. Fine, long. He set down his keys, shrugged off his jacket. You didn't have to wait up. I met with Vivian tonight. The words hung in the air between us. Dan went very still. She told me about Sophie. He closed his eyes, a muscle working in his jaw. When he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. I was going to tell you. When? I stood up, my voice rising despite my determination to stay calm. After a year of lies? After the custody was finalized? When exactly were you planning to mention you have an 8-year-old daughter? I didn't know how. He raked a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. I didn't know she existed until last year. And then Eliza was dying, and Sophie was traumatized, and I was trying to figure out how to be a father to a child who just lost her mother and you didn't think I deserved to know? That I could have helped? That maybe I would have wanted to be there for you both? After everything we went through, after what the doctors told you, I was trying to protect you. From what, Dan? From knowing that the universe has a sick sense of humor? That you managed to father a child when you were barely more than a child yourself, while my voice broke. Well, I can't ever give you that? That's exactly why. He stepped toward me, but I backed away. I knew it would hurt you. I knew you'd see it as some cosmic joke. So instead, you lied. For months. Sneaking around, meeting with lawyers, visiting her behind my back. I was trying to find the right time. There is no right time. I was shouting now, something I almost never did. There's no good way to tell your wife of 16 years that you've been hiding a child from her. I wasn't hiding Sophie from you, Dan insisted. I was trying to establish a relationship with her before complicated things further. She's already been through so much, Avery. She's fragile. And what am I? The question came out broken, vulnerable in a way I hadn't intended. Dan's face crumpled. You're my wife. My partner. The person I love most in this world. Except for your daughter. It's not the same kind of love. You know that. I did know that. Intellectually. But emotionally, all I felt was betrayal and a bone-deep sense of inadequacy. Natalie, she's your lawyer? He nodded. Family law specialist? How close are you to getting custody? Dan sank onto the couch, suddenly looking exhausted. The hearing is in 3 weeks. Sophie's caseworker supports it. Her foster family is on board with the transition. It's looking good. And then what? She just moves in here? Into the spare room we use as my studio? Into our life that has never included children? I've been looking at houses. 3 bedrooms. Near good schools? He couldn't meet my eyes. I was going to tell you this weekend. I stared at him, realization dawning. You've been planning to move us? I've been exploring options. For when you knew? For when we decided together what was best. But you already decided what was best. Without me. You decided I couldn't handle the truth, so you just planned our future around your lies. They weren't lies, Avery. They were omissions. To give me time to figure things out. Omissions. I laughed, a harsh sound that didn't seem to belong to me. That's what we're calling it? What would you have done? He asked quietly. If I had come home a year ago and said, I just found out I have a 7-year-old daughter from a college relationship and her mother is dying, what would you have done? I would have stood by you. The force of my own voice startled me. I would have been there for you both. I would have helped you navigate being a sudden father to a grieving child. I would have opened my home, my heart. My voice broke again. That's what partners do, Dan. They face the hard things together. I thought I was protecting you, he whispered. No, you were protecting yourself. From having to face my pain, from having to watch me struggle with this gift you've been given that I never can. I wiped angrily at my tears. Where does she think you live? What have you told her about me? She knows I'm married. That my wife doesn't know about her yet. That I'm trying to find the right time. Does she think I'll hate her? That I won't want her? Dan looked stricken. No, I've never implied that. But you've implied I'm too fragile to handle her existence. That must be comforting for an 8-year-old who just lost her mother. That's not fair. None of this is fair. I gestured wildly around our home, the home we'd built together, filled with photos of just the 2 of us, mementos from trips we'd taken, art we'd collected. A life carefully constructed around our childlessness. You've been living a double life, Dan. Building a relationship with a daughter I didn't know existed while lying to my face every single day. I was trying to protect everyone, he said, his voice breaking. Sophie, you, myself. I was trying to do the right thing, by doing the wrong thing in every possible way. I moved toward the door, grabbing my purse. Where are you going? Panic edged his voice. I need space. Time to think. Avery, please. It's after midnight. It's pouring rain. I should have been told a year ago, Dan. I deserve that much respect. I'll go. You stay. He stood, reaching for his keys. I'll get a hotel room. No, I need to not be here right now. In this house with all these memories and lies. I pulled on my jacket. I'll be at Rachel's. At least let me see a text when you get there safely. I paused at the door, looking back at this man I thought I knew completely. When can I meet her? Sophie. He looked surprised by the question. You want to? She's your daughter. Of course I want to meet her. She has a visit scheduled Sunday. At the park near the foster home. We feed the ducks. I nodded once, then walked out into the rain. For 2 days, I stayed at my friend Rachel's apartment, ignoring Dan's calls and responding to his increasingly desperate texts with terse assurances that I was safe, just thinking. Rachel, to her credit, didn't push for details after my initial tear-soaked explanation. She provided wine, ice cream, and silent companionship, exactly what I needed. On Sunday morning, I texted Dan, "What time at the park?" His response was immediate, 2 p.m., Jefferson Park, by the pond. Are you sure? I didn't answer. I wasn't sure of anything except that I needed to see her. This child who was half Dan, who had his blood running through her veins in a way no child of mine ever would. Rachel dropped me off at the park entrance at 1:45. Call me if you need an extraction, she said, squeezing my hand. Anytime. The day was surprisingly bright after days of rain, the air washed clean. I spotted them immediately, Dan on a bench near the pond, a small figure beside him. They were feeding ducks, the child laughing as the birds quacked and fought over pieces of bread. I approached slowly, my heart hammering. Dan saw me first, his face registering surprise, then hope, then nervousness. He leaned down to say something to the girl, who turned to look at me. Sophie had Dan's eyes, that unusual blue-gray that had first attracted me to him 20 years ago. But her features were delicate, her dark hair falling in waves past her shoulders, nothing like Dan's sandy brown. Hello, I said, stopping a few feet away. Hi, she replied shyly. Are you Avery? I nodded, thrown by hearing my name from her lips. Dan had talked about me. Then, I'm Sophie. She held out a small hand formally, and I shook it, struck by the absurdity and the solemnity of the moment. It's very nice to meet you. Sophie. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Daddy says you work in a museum with old art and stuff. That's cool. Daddy. The word pierced me even as I smiled. I do. I help decide which art to show and how to display it so people can learn from it. I like art, she said, holding up a plastic bag of bread pieces. Want to feed the ducks with us? Such a simple invitation. So much complicated emotion behind it. I'd like that, I said, accepting a handful of bread. Dan hadn't spoken. He watched us with an expression I couldn't read, hope and fear battling across his features. For an hour, the three of us fed ducks, walked around the pond, and talked about safe topics, Sophie's favorite subjects in school, art and science, her foster family, nice but with too many rules, her memories of her mother, fading but still sharp in unexpected moments. She was bright, articulate, and carried a sadness beyond her years. I recognized the look of someone trying to be brave when their world had collapsed. I'd seen it in my own mirror after my miscarriage, after my mother died, after finding that drawing in Dan's car. I have to go to the bathroom, Sophie announced finally, pointing to the public restrooms nearby. I'll take you, Dan offered. Dad, I'm 8, not a baby. It's right there. She rolled her eyes in a gesture so reminiscent of Dan that I almost gasped. Dan hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but come straight back. When she was out of earshot, we both spoke at once. She's wonderful. I'm so sorry. We stopped, a ghost of our old rhythm. Dan took a breath. I've been a fool, he said quietly. The worst kind of fool. Thinking I could handle this alone. Thinking I was protecting you when I was just taking away your choice. I watched Sophie walk to the restroom, her small figure straight-backed and determined. Yes, you were. I turned back to him. But I understand why, and I understand why she needs you. She needs us, Dan said, his voice breaking slightly. If that's something you can consider, if that's something you want. I don't know what I want anymore, I admitted. Everything I thought I knew has changed. But I know she deserves better than what she's been through. And I know you love her already. I do. His eyes filled with tears. It happened so fast, Avery. From the moment I saw her picture, something just clicked into place. And then meeting her, getting to know her. She's incredible, strong and smart and so much like her mother in some ways, but also like you, I finished. She has your eyes. And that thing you do when you're thinking. That little furrow between your brows. Dan looked surprised. You noticed that? I notice everything about her, I said softly. How could I not? She's part of you. Sophie emerged from the restroom and walked back toward us, stopping to examine something on the ground, a leaf, a bug. I couldn't tell from this distance. I don't know if I can do this, I admitted, my voice barely audible. Be a mother to someone else's child. A child you had with a woman I never knew, from a time in your life before me. It's a lot to process, I know, and I wouldn't blame you if you walked away. I betrayed your trust in the worst way, but that's just it. I turned to face him fully. Walking away punishes her. And she's the only innocent one in all of this. Sophie approached, holding something in her cupped hands. Look what I found. A baby turtle. She opened her palms to reveal a tiny turtle no bigger than a quarter. Can we keep him, please? Dan looked at me helplessly. Before either of us could respond, Sophie turned those gray-blue eyes on me. Avery, don't you think he needs a home? My foster mom won't let me have pets, but maybe when I live with Daddy. The hopeful look on her face undid me completely. This child had lost everything. Her mother, her home, her sense of security. And here she was, wanting to save something even smaller and more vulnerable than herself. I think, I said carefully, that wild turtles are happiest in the wild. But maybe we could get you a pet when things are more settled. Her face lit up. Really? Like a dog? Or a cat? Or a bigger turtle? We'll have to see what's best for everyone, Dan interjected, throwing me a grateful look. For now, let's put this little guy back where he can find his family. Sophie nodded seriously. By the water. That's where turtles live. We walked to the pond's edge together, and Sophie gently placed the tiny turtle near the water. It sat motionless for a moment, then slowly made its way toward the safety of the pond. Bye, little guy, Sophie whispered. Then, turning to us both, do I have to go back to the foster home now? The question, so direct, so vulnerable, hung in the air between us. Yes, sweetheart, Dan said gently. Just for now. But soon things will be different. I promise. Will Avery be there too? She asked, looking up at me with those eyes. Dan's eyes. I met Dan's gaze over her head. Saw the question there, the hope, the fear. I'd like to spend more time with you, I said carefully. Get to know you better. Would that be okay? Sophie considered this, then nodded. I think my mom would have liked you. The simple statement knocked the breath from me. Why do you say that? She shrugged. She always said I needed more art in my life. And you know about art. Plus, you're nice, and you like animals, and you don't talk to me like I'm a baby. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I made this for you. In case I met you today. With trembling hands, I unfolded it. Another drawing, this one showing 3 stick figures. A tall man, a tall woman, and a smaller figure between them, all holding hands. Above it, in those same wobbly letters, my new family? The question mark broke my heart and mended it in the same moment. Sophie, Dan murmured, his voice thick. That's beautiful. I knelt down to her level, the drawing clutched in my hand. Thank you for this. It's the most special gift I've ever received. Even if you're mad at Daddy? She asked, her voice small. He said you might be mad that he didn't tell you about me sooner. I was upset, I admitted. But never because of you. Never, she nodded solemnly. Grown-ups keep secrets sometimes. Mom had lots of secrets, but she said some secrets are okay if they protect people you love. Out of the mouths of babes. I met Dan's eyes again, saw the tears there. Sometimes, I agreed. But families work best when they're honest with each other, even when the truth is hard. Are we going to be a family? Sophie asked, the question direct, unadorned with the complications adults would layer onto it. Dan held his breath, waiting for my answer. I looked at this child, this miracle I never expected, this living embodiment of the family I'd thought forever beyond my reach. I thought of all the pain of the past week, of 16 years of loving Dan, of the future stretched before us, uncertain, complicated, but suddenly possible, I think, I said slowly, that families come in all different shapes, and they're not always perfect or easy, but they try. They learn. They forgive. I stood and after a moment's hesitation held out my hand to Sophie. She took it, her small fingers wrapping trustingly around mine. So yes, I said, extending my other hand to Dan. I think we might be a family, if we all work at it together. Dan took my hand, his eyes never leaving mine. Together, he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. Sophie smiled, the first full, unguarded smile I'd seen from her. I knew it, she said with a child's certainty. I knew you'd be my new mom. The words stung and soothed simultaneously, a bittersweet acknowledgement that her first mother was gone, that no one could replace Eliza, but also a promise, a possibility I'd long since abandoned. As we walked toward Dan's car, Sophie between us, still holding our hands, I felt something shift within me, grief making room for hope, betrayal softening into understanding, fear yielding to the tentative beginnings of love. It wouldn't be easy. There would be hard days ahead, custody hearings, moving, establishing boundaries and routines, helping Sophie navigate her grief while Dan and I rebuilt our trust. There would be moments when the pain of Dan's deception would resurface, when the ache of my own childlessness would flare anew. But watching Sophie climb into the back seat, carefully placing her drawing on the seat beside her, I knew with sudden clarity that some journeys, the ones that change you most profoundly, begin not with a choice but with a surrender. To possibility. To forgiveness. To love in its most unexpected forms. As Dan drove us toward Sophie's foster home, I reached into my pocket and touched the first drawing, the one that had started all of this. I love you, Daddy, in a child's unsteady hand. A truth that had almost destroyed us, but truths, unlike secrets, can build as well as break. And sometimes, the most painful revelations lead to the most beautiful beginnings.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.